So Xebec is just on an absolute rampage, and the only person that can stop him seems to be God themselves. Rox's full power is finally about to be shown, and a new, or I guess an old, monster trio is about to be formed too, and God Valley is in a state of total chaos. Which makes a lot of sense because it looks like the God of Chaos itself might be awakening at long last too. Sounds wild? Well, let's get into an absolutely crazy chapter of One Piece. And right off the gate, I gotta say, my love of Xebec just continues to soar through the roof. I mean, the dude is awesome, plain and simple. He just casually has dismantled Garling here, an army of his Domi Reversied clan members, and is smiling as he squares up with Imu, more focused on Kaido getting a new devil fruit, I guess. Long story short, this man is a next level badass. And honestly, the same kind of goes for his wife too. I mean, Iris is a really rowdy one, and I absolutely love that. She definitely kind of matches his chaotic energy, and she actually has a lot going on that I want to talk about in another video on Tuesday, since I don't think I'll be able to squeeze everything about her in here. So today we're gonna be all about Rox and Imu, and then next time we'll talk about Miss Davy and Teach. And let me just say, bless Rox, to be honest, because his actions in chapter 1162 clarify a bunch of theorist questions that have been floating around for a good while now. For example, we saw that he crushed Garling and with one hand was able to slice his head clean open, only adding to the Holy Knight's fraud allegations that, you know, are kind of piling up more and more. But something else that we finally got confirmation of though through Garling and Xebec's interaction is that Conqueror's Haki doesn't completely just override the Holy Knight's immortality powers in general. Garling kindly enough literally explains to us that it was slowed, not negated, when seen riding a duck with a giant cleaved chunk of his head. Now this part already seemed clear enough to me, at least when Summers was still yapping after Scappa, you know, chopped him up into pieces, but now we've got it, you know, in writing, which is good to know. Another really cool thing that we got confirmation of here is that this member of the Davy clan, the big one with the cool beard, is actually Xebec's father or grandfather, which is particularly sick because he has a straw hat, in case you didn't notice, which we actually saw when they were first revealed on stage a couple of chapters ago. To me, this only kind of fuels the idea that Davy Jones is the true name of Joy Boy, since the Davy clan is wearing hats symbolic of the first pirate, right? And seeing as his daddy's wearing one, I find it really interesting that Rox himself wasn't rocking one, to be real with you. Like, maybe it was a branding issue, he didn't want to step on Roger's toes with that or something, I don't know. I actually think that Rox being a descendant of Joy Boy directly makes a ton of sense, especially because One Piece is still a story mostly about inherited will. So ironically, Xebec and Teach being direct descendants of Joy Boy's bloodline, while Roger and Luffy are the ones carrying his actual will, would be kind of a cool thread that really exemplifies a key part of the story. Blood isn't anywhere near as important as free will, and honestly, bloodlines and pride oftentimes end up backfiring for characters who focus on them too much. Looking at you, Ace, but it's also like the central and fatal flaw of the Celestial Dragons altogether. And while we are on the uncomfortable topics of the Celestial Dragons, let's talk about Garling here for a second too. Why did Oda off-screen his fight with Rox? Like, this was an absolutely sick opportunity to finally showcase a supposed Holy Knight powerhouse against the GOAT of all pirates. I've been absolutely itching to see these two finally square off, and instead it's just a quick off-screen moment, and when we come back, boy does Garling not look good. It kind of seems that Blackbeard inherited the power to win fights off-screen from his old dad. I mean, what we got was just that Xebec slashes at Garling, and then some stuff happens, and, you know, like, there's this entire cut through the island, and we come back to it and just see Garling folded on the ground. Interesting point, actually. I just noticed that his head has actually healed at this point. Pretty neat. Actually, it's a quick, weird gripe I noticed throughout this whole chapter. It's a lot of bouncing around and time skipping and then going, like, right after Xebec rocked the Davy Clan demons, suddenly Imu is just there without any fancy transition, and so is Whitebeard, I guess. And don't get me wrong, I understand that this is how comic and manga transitions just work, but man, I kind of feel like we're missing some stuff happening in between here. And hey, who knows? I mean, maybe the editors are really crunching down God Valley for some reason, or Oda is specifically choosing to dodge these specific interactions to build some crazy hype, or hide some stuff he only wants to reveal later, and I personally think that that's exactly what's happening here. Really think about what we've gotten so far. every single time we've seen Rox fight in this flashback, it's normally his first attack, then cut straight to the end of the battle. Now this happens multiple times with Harold, and now has happened on God Valley too, and I do really think that that's because Oda might actually be prepping an insane lore drop about Xebec's true power, more specifically I think his devil fruit. Really, besides business decisions, I really can't think of any other reason that Oda would constantly keep avoiding showing us Rox in full battle. Like, he's clearly epic, he's clearly important, and it seems like Oda is really enjoying him a lot too. I mean, he's kind of stolen the entire show of this flashback, and I think I speak for both you and me if I say we're all here for it. So to me, I think what's about to happen is that we're about to get a reveal that Rox has a devil fruit that we've already seen in the story, and Oda didn't want to spoil that yet. To be specific, I think he has one of 4 possible fruits. And yes, that doesn't mean there is a chance that he doesn't have a fruit either, but come on, look at his Jolly Roger with the flames and everything. There's flames around him right now, like something is going on, right? So let's break this down real quick. The most obvious answer is obviously yeah, the darkness fruit. This one lines up pretty well with everything we know about Rox, Teach, and their mutual plans, right? Like, Xebec claimed he needed 2 specific devil fruits, and Harold needed to eat one of them specifically for his grand plan to be completed. Right now, just wager a guess and say that the fruit that Harold has in his vault is, yes, the Nika fruit that Luffy eats later, since we did see someone kidnap that fruit earlier in the flashback while Harold actually died. Though I do guess that that actually took place after God Valley. Timeline-wise, this is kind of all over the place. But this also lines up with why Shanks went to visit Harold and the fact that Shanks was hunting the Nika fruit to begin with. We do know that the Giants worship Nika, so if I'm Rox and I need the Giants and the Gallela on my side, then yeah, I think it makes the most sense that Harold had the Nika fruit, and opposite of it, Rox has the darkness fruit. They do look crazy similar. Clearly the darkness fruit is super important in general by itself, since Teach was hunting it as the ultimate devil fruit, and its power is beyond broken, and we probably haven't even seen the tip of the iceberg of what it can actually do. I think there's a really strong case to be made that if Xebec has a devil fruit, it's gonna be the same one that his kid has been chasing his entire life and ends up taking, you know, when he leaves the Whitebeard crew. But that being said, the second fruit he could have is straight up the Nika fruit itself, and maybe Harold's secret hidden fruit is something different. Especially if this fruit is the same one that Loki ends up having, then we do know for a fact it's not the Nika fruit, right? Because that would not work. Plus, I kind of think it'd be pretty sick to have this wild reveal that Xebec was the former wielder of the Gum Gum fruit this entire time, you know, completing this cool Luffy and Xebec parallel that's happening right now. Xebec is kind of screaming, I am a lot more like Luffy than Roger, if you ask me, and I do think that that's very much on purpose. He's Loki's hero, and I feel like we all want or think that Loki will end up following Luffy, right? So it only makes sense that Loki ends up seeing how similar Luffy is actually to Xebec, funnily enough, and then ends up following him. You know, kind of completing what Rox wanted to do with Harold. But there are 2 other fruits that I can still see as viable options too here. I actually haven't talked about this since we first got Rox's reveal, but I do think there's still a really good chance that we'll get the wild reveal that Xebec has Buggy's Chop Chop fruit. I don't know, part of me still wants to think that that hand pose he made in that chapter was that rocks, paper, scissors pose, right? And even though, yes, I know it's more likely he was just, you know, stating his 2 questions, even though very strong with the 2 questions and the fingers, no, let me dream, right? And I actually think that the wanted poster is the bigger piece of evidence here. Sorry, Luffy. Oops. I just think that Rox having the same exact wanted poster pose as Buggy is not a coincidence, right? If he doesn't end up being his secret father, I think that the fruits might be the little element that Oda was teasing with this instead. Plus, I kind of think that it would match what little we do know about his fighting style, which are these crazy Mihawk-style giant slashes that destroy everything in sight, which works a lot better with a Chop Chop fruit rather than a Darkness or Nika fruit. But my last Devil Fruit option for Rox, which is kind of a different kind of out there idea, is the Ope Ope no Mi. Think about this. Seeing as it's a top tier legendary devil fruit, something we do know that Teach was absolutely fascinated in getting his hands on, and also matching the hand pose that Xebec busted out, you know, and the mountain getting chopped in half when Xebec didn't have his sword drawn, I kind of think that at this point, all the theories about Xebec putting his consciousness in someone else and surviving God Valley at this point kind of are slowly going out the window, but there is a really small chance, so I'll leave it open. I just know that I personally would lose my goddamn mind if, Xebec busted out a Shambles or a Shock Willy on whatever the hell that Emu Saturn fusion thing is that they got going on there. So yeah, I guess it's time we talk about the Gyuki God King shaped elephant in the room, Satimu Imern. Zawardo! Right, after a brief little headspace combo, Emo decided it's now time to kick it up a little bit a notch, kind of like on Elbaf, we're seeing the parallels, right, on God Valley 2, and seems to possess Saint Saturn. Now, to be completely fair here, and to be a little bit more nuanced, we actually don't even know if Emo is fusing with Saturn, or just like standing on his head, and it looks cool. Vague shadows are vague, I guess. I mean, I was really sad because I saw the cool tentacle shapes at first and was like, yeah, Cthulhu Abyss validation finally, in case you haven't all seen my recent Abyss content. I really think that Oda's going full eldritch horror with Emo here, and I thought that these little protruding shapes at Emo's feet were tentacles, like Cthulhu. But no, yeah, they are just Saturn's horns. Forgot that they're shaped that way, I guess. I don't know. Saturn somehow turned, now that he's dead, into the least exciting Gorosei. One day, maybe I'll get my Cthulhu confirmation though. But for now, just more shadowy, inky figure. We just really don't have any idea yet what Emo actually looks like, or if they just look like that. What is actually truly insane that this actually happened is that Emo did end up showing up on God Valley, started creating some Domi Reversi demons, and then is about to square off with what I'm just gonna call the strongest or the stronger monster trio, Rox, Whitebeard, and Kaido. Now, actually thinking about the timeline of this chapter, another crazy reveal might actually be that Garling can also perform the Domi Reversi, right? I mean, Emu doesn't actually appear until the end of this chapter, and the Davy clan was already turned into demons, so it does at least raise some interesting questions, right? And I would just say, oh yeah, Emu was possessing someone else first, but that also wouldn't really make any sense considering that Emu was asking Saturn about the current events and we see the lightning coming and everything. Like, if they were possessing, let's say, Gunko, for example, which, by the way, I thought was gonna happen anyways, then wouldn't Emu know what's going on, right? Just some food for thought here. Domi Reversi might not just be an Emu exclusive move like we all previously thought. And again, it kind of makes sense as well, right? If Emu's got the epic power and can seemingly just distribute it under his disciples, the commander of their personal guard having it would at least make some sense too. That, or the woman who was with Garling can do it, and that works for me as well, I guess. I actually have been bouncing the idea that Emu is just straight up the Abyss itself, and there is no main body in that sense. I've been kind of thinking about that. Who knows if that'll have some merit later on, but just like, a bunch of satellites for this Abyss network that's kind of similar to Punk Records, right? No, but the most important thing in chapter 1162 about Emu is what Rox chooses, of course, to call Emu at the end when explaining it to Whitebeard and Kaido. He doesn't say that's the true king of the world, or the leader of the world government, or, just a blob with a too big crown. He describes Emu turn as the world. By the way, Toei, you know the drill. Make sure that Takehito Koyasu and Patrick Sates are Xebec's voice actors. You have one job, right? Those are the voice actors for Dio Brando, by the way, just to make that point very clear for you guys. Both of them already have One Piece roles, so it's even easier casting them. It would not be the first time. We need to make this happen. Now, on a slightly more serious note, though, this does fuel a very big theory I've had for a while, which in short is that Emu is the Earth God from the Harley text. Based on how I've analyzed the mural from chapter 1138, where we see a king with a crown very similar to Emu's, and how the Harley text describes the Earth God as a raging destroyer of the world, I think there's a really fair case to be made that Emu is the Earth God. Of course, I once again have to point out that Emu's name is the word Umi in reverse, which is the word that means ocean in Japanese, which is often used as an argument for Emu being the sea devil, but considering it is Umi backwards, I kind of like to point out usually that it could mean that Emu is quite literally the opposite of Umi, aka the Earth God or the Earth Devil. Plus, let's not forget that Davy Jones, the person that Rox worships, is framed to be the Sea Devil by Nico Robin during Long Ring Longland. So that kind of would pan out pretty well. And especially now, with that he's the world comment, I think that Emu being the ancient earth god of legend just got a pretty big evidence booster too. This might even fall in line with some of the mythological ties that Oda pulls from, right? Basing Emu on Gaia, Mother Earth from Greek mythology. A little bit of a sneak preview at the Iris video I'm actually working on for Tuesday. She might also be named after a Greek goddess with ties to all this stuff, and Gaia is the personification of the earth, and the wife of Uranus, who gave birth to the Titans. And if you're a regular viewer of the channel and you're plugged into my deep, big, meaty mega theories like Titan Piece or the Bagua here, you'll know that Oda pulls from mythology a lot. This mythology specifically. So prepare for my little mythology lesson, because this time it's actually like super important for this entire emo stuff that we got going on here. And actually just recently focused on that in the Bagua theory on how Romance Dawn, the concept of love and betrayal, etc., might actually be a plot of the first world that we see in the mural and the Harley text. Where Nika, the sun god from heaven, and the earth goddess on the planet were once lovers. Now, if Emu is the earth god, who I think a lot of us do think is a woman, by the way, then that's just kind of the cherry on top, really. And also, just to point it out here, Gaia in Greek mythology was the first being to come into existence after chaos, which is also the representative thing of the void, the abyss, the infinite darkness, which is like, the most first world One Piece thing I've ever heard or read in my life. The other beings that are created are Tartarus and Eros, which is another type of abyss and topical with all that Eris stuff floating around, and the primordial force of love, which is like the central theme of this entire God Valley conflict and the story as a whole. So all I'm saying, I guess, is that the four gods of One Piece might have some very clear inspiration here. Hell, even in the story known as Theogony, chaos is referred to as a place, very much like the abyss is in One Piece. And now, the real kicker, Eris, Rox's wife, she is named after the Greek goddess of chaos, who actually comes a lot later down the line in terms of the god family tree. Coincidence? I think not. I don't know, maybe I'll open up the books again and dig a little bit into this more, but just remember, Titan Piece was my biggest agenda of like the last 2 years, and I dropped that one before chapter 1138, so looks like I'm somewhat of an elite thinker. Either that or I'm cooked and my brain is completely fried. One of the two. Could be either. So even if all of that stuff isn't the case, Emu being the earth goddess who uses the weapon Uranus, which is almost all but confirmed to be the weapon that destroyed Lulusia, well, that alone kind of completes the pair, right? And I'm just saying, it seems like Uranus is depicted on the mural in the first world section, right here, in between the big scary dragon and the giant hellflame serpent thing. Don't worry about those in this video. But let's really dig into it in terms of One Piece, because there are a few things about this the world comment Rox drops on us that really stood out to me as well. Most recently, it's the moment from chapter 1107 here, when Van Augur tells Saturn that Teach's goal was the world. A comment that I think hits much harder now, considering that this is the second time Saturn has been part of this type of interaction, and gives us some potential clarity on what Blackbeard's real final goal really is. I already kind of was suspicious that he might just be following in his dad's footsteps, but this all that really confirms it for me. Blackbeard is coming for Emu's head and Emu's power. So Blackbeard will, yes, try to conquer the world, but not as, becoming king of it right away, at least, as I previously thought. It much more seems like he's specifically hunting Emu, who is the world first, which will then probably turn into Teach trying to take over the world, or who knows, maybe not. Which actually also now makes me think that he is probably also looking for the Galela and the devil fruits that Rox was talking about in chapter 1156. And another big comment I wanted to point out here was Monkey D. Dragon in chapter 100. Because in literally the first line, Dragon states that the world is waiting for our answer, and I kinda can't help but wonder if Oda's been preparing for Emu as the world this entire time, even back in chapter 100. And probably, I think that's just generally something many authors do with writing. They figure out the big stuff, like this Emu world connection, and then they start drip feeding it in these cool little details with characters who are tied to them, only for us to realize it way, way later down the line. Xebec, Teach, Dragon, all these characters are not only on God Valley, they are enemies of IMU directly, so they talk about them as the world, and that makes a lot of sense and works pretty perfectly with everything we've learned in this chapter. Especially if the double meaning behind calling IMU the world is a sort of metaphor for their dreams, right? I mean, Xebec wanted to reach the peak of the world, Teach wants to conquer the world, and Dragon wants to liberate the world. And to do all these things, they have to confront and go through IMU first. So Oda could just be getting very deep with the metaphors about IMU and the world, but I do think it would be a double meaning if anything, since IMU has got some mind-bending, world-altering powers themselves. I think it makes a lot of sense that Xebec calls IMU the world as a literal comment about their role in the story, and also metaphorically with the role in his own life, especially considering who he's talking to, his crew members, who only know that Xebec's dream is reaching the peak of the world. They very clearly have not heard of IMU, and I think it's the quickest and most powerful way that, Xebec could express what's in front of them. Whitebeard and Kaido do know Xebec, and hearing that phrase, the world, is probably all they really need to hear in order to square up for their captain, knowing that that's what, he's been talking about for all these years. And allow me to linger on this scene for a little longer, because I really love them in this chapter. I mean, Kaido is goofy as hell when he steals the Azure Dragon fruit, and he is even goofier when he appears at the end in the coldest panel of God Valley yet. Like, honestly, hands down, the Garp panel from chapter 1161 here was very hype, but seeing 3 pirate legends ready to battle God or the world, pretty sick, I gotta say, especially when they're all smiling, joking around, and locking in, not really caring too much about what's in front of them. Like, seriously, I think it's just so wholesome and really fun that Xebec, standing in front of his greatest enemy, takes a moment to just celebrate Kaido and is just genuinely excited and happy for him. He's amped to see his young crew member living his dream, and specifically comments about how he's never seen him that happy. All of this happened right after he gave Newgate the out and essentially told him he didn't need to join this fight if he didn't want to, but Whitebeard is just all in, casually joking about his own bar tap. Like, dude, these 3 are great buddies. This is like an awesome interaction, especially when you consider what's right in front of them at this point in the story. Now, let's be real, are they about to get stomped completely? Yeah, for sure, right? But seeing how the pieces were set up in chapter 1162, I do think we're about to get the truth behind some of Whitebeard and Kaido's iconic comments in the main storyline. The entire looking at your face makes my scar ache thing from chapter 434, or Kaido telling Luffy, Haki transcends everything. Whitebeard seems pretty clear to me. I mean, Garling is on the ground in front of IMU. If IMU decides to raise Garling with some demon powers, or if Garling just gets back up after regenerating and starts crossing blade with Whitebeard, we'll finally get to see if Garling was the man that Whitebeard was talking to Shanks about, or not. Maybe IMU looks like Shanks too. Who knows? At this point, everything's on the table, right? But once we got confirmation that Garling was actually Shanks' dad, I thought this one would be a very cool reveal, and now the pieces are kind of lined up perfectly for that to actually happen. As for Kaido, I think all these massive Haki powerhouses are gonna truly open his eyes, because he's just so excited about having his epic cool dragon devil fruit, and throughout the entire flashback, he's been making comments to Big Mom and Whitebeard about devil fruit, so I think Kaido really thought a powerful broken devil fruit would just put him on par right away with Whitebeard, with Big Mom, and Shiki. So I think what's gonna happen is that seeing Emo, Rock, Scarling, and Whitebeard using some insane Haki to defeat one another, Kaido will get absolutely bodied, and then realize, as he explains to Luffy, that, yeah, Haki transcends all. He has this really badass devil fruit, his crewmates all have them, but I do think that this moment will be when Kaido realizes, yeah, I think I need to up my Haki a little bit more. And here's the deal. Haki and devil fruits are really sick and cool, obviously, but I actually don't think either is what trumps at all. You know what really does in One Piece? Joining the Ohara Patreon. All the future Pirate Kings are over there getting access to some sick exclusive content. The link's in the description. Go check it out. You won't regret it. And if you don't want to support the channel financially, hey, we have a free newsletter every single week about everything One Piece that you can get for free if you just join as a free member. But you know who is regretting stuff? Monkey D. Garp, aka the biggest hypocrite in the Four Blues at this point. I mean, I think someone in the One Piece staff must have told Oda that he's making Garp look a little bit bad with this flashback, so Oda took a few panels in chapter 1162 specifically to point out that Garp did not know that there was this hunting game going on and that the, world nobles were not good people. Because while he and Bogart, the real goat who I just dropped a video on, love to see him in this chapter, while they're running through the burning island, he called Sengoku to ask about what's going on, and Sengoku just says, "Hey man, don't ask any questions. The last dude who did actually went missing." And that does sound a little bit ominous and threatening. But yeah, I guess for now you escaped those allegations safely, Garp, but don't you think you're off the hook yet, because you end up staying with the world government after this battle too, and I don't respect you for that one quite yet. Someone that is earning some respect back though is Roger finally, who seems absolutely amped at all this chaos going on at God Valley. I gotta be real, he's basically not done anything real yet, and I'm kinda expecting that must change at some point as this IMU battle now finally happens. What I did find really interesting though is how Roger really focuses in on not knowing a lot as something fun and exciting. Like, at this point in the story, he has made it to Lodestar Island and realized it wasn't the final island of the Grand Line, but then all this stuff happens with Shaki being kidnapped and God Valley, so he hasn't set off on that big grand final adventure to claim the One Piece yet. And we actually don't even know if Roger knows about the poneglyphs at this point yet either. I think sometimes it gets falsely claimed that Roger immediately just found out about all the poneglyph stuff on Lodestar, but that's just not what actually is written in the manga. That's a fair interpretation of it, yes, but when Roger explains Laugh Tale to Whitebeard during chapter 966, Roger just reveals that he knows the poneglyphs explain where Laugh Tale is, and then in a separate comment he states that the journey to uncover the truth of this island started 13 years ago, a year before God Valley, when he found out Lodestar wasn't the last island. So you see how these two might not be connected at all. So all this is to say, Roger is definitely curious about what's going on right now, and Xebec seems to be the one with all the answers. I have been theorizing for a long time now that Roger learned more about the secrets of the world from Xebec on God Valley, and if you want to know more about that, check out this video right here where I dig into exactly what Xebec might reveal to Roger at the end of this God Valley flashback. Otherwise, thanks so much to all of our really epic Patreons who are already here, and I will see you on Tuesday for the Blackbeard and Eddie video, which is gonna be pretty interesting, and we're gonna dive into a lot of theory stuff.